Ever wonder what it's like to raise white Cornish cross broiler chicks? Well, I'm about to show you. I just picked up a batch of 14. It's a mix of males, females, and straight run. I literally just took all that was left for this hatch date, and I'm about to put them in my brooder. I set my brooder up prior to picking up my batch of chicks, just so that it would be nice and warm and cozy before they got here. All right, guys, our Cornish cross broilers are a whole 2 weeks old at this point, and you may have noticed they're a little bit bigger. Actually, quite a bit bigger. These guys grow extremely fast, and I will say they only get messier as they grow. So we've probably changed the brooder out about 3 times this week. Just trying to keep it nice and dry and clean to keep them from getting sick and to avoid coccidiosis. They're going through a lot of feed. Oh, they're very excited. They think they're gonna get fed, and a lot of water. It's about 2 p.m. and I filled their gallon waterer this morning about 8 o'clock, and it is more than 3/4 gone. So I am filling their gallon waterer twice a day now. And as you can see, I just can't feed them enough. I filled their feeder this morning, and all that's left is shavings that they've kicked in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill this again. Usually by 2 weeks, I'm still feeding them 24/7. So I'm gonna go ahead and just keep filling this feeder every time it empties out to keep these guys happy. So while these guys are chowing down on their second helping of feed today, I do want to point out a couple of changes that happened this week. Obviously, they're feathering out more and more as the days go by. We are still experiencing some lows in the 30s in the evening. Today, it's a glorious 65 degrees, so we're enjoying that. But my goal is by 3 to 4 weeks to have these guys out in the chicken tractor on the field. And instead of taking them from a very warm brooder and putting them out in the field where the temperature is going to be quite different, I am slowly decreasing the amount of heat that I'm giving them in the brooder. So as you've noticed, my heat lamp went from here, and I'm slowly moving it up. Since it's a warmer day, they're having even less heat today. They're not huddled up underneath it, showing me that they're cold. They are nice and dispersed throughout the brooder when they're not eating. So they are needing less and less heat. As far as brooder cleaning, the faster they grow, the faster they make a mess. We have cleaned the brooder 3 times this week, trying to keep it as nice and clean and dry as possible so that we will have healthy birds. So by week 2, I'm noticing these legs are getting even thicker. Their body mass is just grown exponentially. And they are feathering out extremely fast, much faster than an egg-laying breed would. Okay, we are at week 3, and quite a bit has changed this week. Typically by now, since these guys are almost fully feathered, I would have moved them out into my chicken tractors out in the field. But because we live in Northeast Ohio, Mother Nature has decided to throw us one last couple days of snow for the year. So these guys get an extra few days in the brooder. Since they're not able to be moved outdoors, I did have to separate them into 2 separate brooders just because they have grown so much. The brooder space was too crowded. I have changed the brooder every other day for the past week, just trying to keep it dry and clean. And with 14 birds in one brooder, it was just too little space for them. So now they're divided 7 and 7 in each trough. And they seem to be a bit happier, having a little bit more space. Another thing that changed this week was I started feeding them 12 hours on and 12 hours off. I was noticing their crops were extremely large all the time, which is good. That means that they're good hearty eaters, but Cornish Cross will literally eat themselves to death. It's called sudden chicken death syndrome, and that's something I wanted to avoid. I'm now 3 weeks in. I have invested in feed and my time into these birds, and I did not want to lose a bird from overeating. So I am now feeding them 12 hours on and 12 hours off to avoid that. As you can see, by week 3, they are pretty much fully feathered, aside from a little bit of chick fuzz left on their heads and neck area. Even with the cooler temperatures, I'm still filling the waterer twice a day, and the waterer holds a gallon of water. If the temperatures weren't going to be so low this week, they would have been just fine out in the chicken tractor. We have a 3-sided tractor with some open areas. With snow and low temperatures, these guys would get a bit stressed out from the temperature change. So it's just safer to keep them indoors for a few more days. All right, guys, I'll see you next week for a week 4 update. All right, it is week 4 of our Cornish Cross broilers, and we are finally outdoors. I am so grateful for the Ohio weather warming up so that these guys could go outside. This is the longest I have brooded Cornish Cross indoors, and as you can see, they are quite large. They moved out here to the tractors just a couple of days ago, and they are doing fantastic. They are so happy. I did have to upgrade their feeders because they are bigger and they are in a bigger space. So we are using the big trough feeders. I have 2 of these guys inside the tractor. And then I'm also gonna give you a look at our snazzy waterer setup. So for our waterer setup, we use a 5-gallon bucket with a screw lid. And then we put a 3/4 inch bulkhead fitting on the bottom of the bucket. And then we use some 3/4 inch PVC pipe, some PVC tees, bushings, and then of course we attach the cup waterers. It's week 5 of our Cornish Cross broilers out in the chicken tractor on the field. Everybody's doing really good this week. Still feeding 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Our cup water is hooked up to a 5-gallon bucket, and I'm filling that each day. They're not quite depleting 5 gallons of water a day, probably about half of that, but I'm just making sure that they have ample water at all times. Our temperatures have been in the lower digits, so they're not overly warm, so they're not taking in as much water as they would be, say, in July in the heat of summer. Everybody's still able to move around. I'm moving the tractor to fresh grass once daily. In the next few days, we're probably gonna have to change that to twice daily just to keep them on fresh pasture at all times, keeping their area clean. But I'm really impressed with how well they're growing out. They're growing at a really great rate. We have straight run in this pen, so we have a little bit of a size difference between the males and the females, but that's okay. I like a little bit of variety. We'll see you guys next week for a week 6 update. Picked up all my broilers from the processor, and I'm extremely happy. I took my 14 broilers at exactly 50 days after receiving them, and they all finished out beautifully. All of them are between 4 and 5 pounds, and I have to say most of them are around the 5-pound range. So good husbandry, good feed will equal great birds in the end. If you're interested in hearing more or learning more about raising your own Cornish Cross broilers or other meat breeds, be sure to go over on the Meyer Hatchery blog, follow us on YouTube, or check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages.